Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lore and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. Well, Nichegamer has done it again. I think for the for I don't know, the third or fourth time in a row. I've lost track of how many times they've tried to pull this nonsense, where some poll somewhere, usually from Japan, surveys the population and asks gamers what their all-time favorite game is or what the best game ever made is. And recently, in the past 5 years, there has been an overwhelming consensus among the public, Zelda fans, casual fans, gamers everywhere, that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of the best games ever made. I myself have kind of acknowledged this, saying that like some of my favorite games, stuff like A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, the original Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, some of my favorite games ever in that series, games that I used to consider the best ever made, are not nearly as good as Breath of the Wild. And I've seen a number of other hardcore fans say the same thing. I think Breath of the Wild is a monumental achievement to the medium. It's an evolution of the open world genre, and I think the people who are downplaying this, who are like ignoring this and writing it off and like just not pretending that the game doesn't exist, are really doing themselves a disservice, not only to themselves, but to whoever listens to them, right? We are at the point now where hardcore anti-Nintendo shills, game journos, people like Nichegamer are religiously attacking Breath of the Wild because so many people consider it one of the best games ever made, right? Like it's remarkable seeing the response every time one of these polls comes out and Breath of the Wild inevitably tops the list, and seeing the damage control that Nichegamer unleashes. Like, oh man, our review, our insightful, in-depth review thought the game wasn't that good. We only gave it like a 7 out of 10. Nobody cares what you think, Nichegamer. I was calling you on your shit when the game came out. All right, I had probably played the game more than you had when you published that review, and when you tried to like steer people towards some niche anime RPG from like the 90s or whatever you do. Like, I've seen people like this have existed since forever, right? These are the guys who will like tell you Darksiders is better, that Okami HD is better, that Trails of Mana is better, which isn't even the same genre, by the way. Like, these guys will do anything that comes to mind other than like acknowledge the fact that Breath of the Wild is a very good game. And that's the thing, is that it is indisputably a good game. Even if it's not your favorite, even if there is something you like more, even another Zelda game in the Zelda series, like, I don't think there's any denying that Breath of the Wild is a great game. And I think that's kind of the position we're in now, where people have to like go to insane lengths to try and downplay Breath of the Wild. Like, people complaining about the dungeons. Oh, they're too short and easy. There's not enough of them. Well, Majora's Mask had about four. Like Majora's Mask had four dungeons, and that game is beloved because it has a compelling, unique narrative in a well fleshed out setting that's very unique and distinct from the setting. What exactly sets apart Breath of the Wild from Majora's Mask in that regard? If anything, I would say Breath of the Wild is better than it, right? Like, I've heard people try to say that Breath of the Wild doesn't work because, like, oh, you're mostly running around an empty field. But that empty field is one of the most fleshed out, interesting locations in all of video games, with like a lot of things to see, a lot of things to do, a lot of things to collect, great combat. It really does feel like anyone who tries to downplay Breath of the Wild's innovations in this regard are just running into a brick wall over and over and over again. They are stubbornly trying to downplay this release as one of the best of all time, and it just hasn't stuck at all. Like, I grew up being told that basically every Nintendo game was a complete disaster and a failure, right? Luigi's Mansion, Pikmin, Beautiful Joe, like all these great games that I grew up playing and enjoying. Oh man, it's a failure. It's a travesty to the franchise. Like Nintendo has completely lost it. They don't know what they're doing. Oh, these other companies are doing so much better. Uh, Again, back then, I think when it's a smaller release, this mindset, like this this tactic actually works because not enough people are playing the game. But in Breath of the Wild's case, so many people have played the game. More, I think, than people have played shit like Elden Ring or any other game in the any other big open world fantasy game, right? Enough people have played this stuff where it's kind of obvious that Breath of the Wild is better, right? People aren't listening to game journos when they go off about how there are superior alternatives to Breath of the Wild because first of all, there aren't. And second of all, if there were, people would just play them both. That's the elephant in the room that people really don't want to talk about. Is that like, oh man, why would you play Breath of the Wild when Horizon Zero Dawn exists? Well, because I like open world games, all right? So when I finish Horizon Zero Dawn, hypothetically, I would just move on to Breath of the Wild. But the thing is, Horizon Zero Dawn is completely terrible. I've played it at this point. I put 10 hours into that game. I know what it's like. I know it's clunky. I know it's not all that well thought out. I know it's not as good as Breath of the Wild, right? Like I've played both and I've evaluated them both, and I know that Breath of the Wild is superior. I know the real reason why people are keep religiously attacking Breath of the Wild is because they have a decades old problem with Nintendo dominating the console industry, and they've been desperately trying to downplay it for they've been desperately trying to destroy them since like the 90s, when Sega was introduced and like we were supposed to pretend Sonic was the next big thing, like remember when Sonic was better than Mario World when that was never really true. Like that's it's kind of the same thing. That mindset, that thinking has kind of expanded to other avenues of gaming where you don't judge a game based on how good it is or how much you enjoy it or how much time you spent playing it or how much like other people enjoy it. No. You're supposed to like evaluate it based on how hype it gets you. You're supposed to like be wowed by the graphics and like get ready to consume the product and then like consume the next product. Like that's the reoccurring thing I've seen is that like people who like consume non-Nintendo products just well, I suppose used to. I don't really see this so much anymore. They used to just go from like bland third party action game to bland third party action game. All right, like BioShock. All right, people went from BioShock to Portal to Mass Effect with no real like consideration as to like what Nintendo was doing at that time, even though it was like far superior. And back when people still had like faith in the gaming industry, who thought they were like being adequately represented, people were willing to assume that like, oh, this is the peak of gaming right now. The BioShock is one of the best games ever made. But now, years later, when the same game journals try to like sell people on like Horizon, on The Last of Us Part 2, on God of War Ragnarok, you're seeing a lot of these people just kind of go like, nah, I'm good. Like, I think what's happening is Nintendo's library is so vast and covers so many genres and like encompasses so many different audiences, like, you can't possibly say that you don't like Nintendo and claim to be Nintendo. It claim to be a gamer. It's just not possible. Okay, there's no way you wouldn't be interested in anything that Nintendo produces, right? It's just laughable. At the very idea of that is laughable, right? And and seeing so many people like continue to attack Nintendo in this way, right? Like I'm seeing like Demish talk about like how 2022 was one of the worst years ever for Nintendo, when I would say it's one of their stronger years ever. Honestly, I've been a big fan of the Switch output at 2022. I it I wonder just how much longer this is going to go on. How much this like kind of extremist alarmism about how Nintendo is no longer producing great games is going to continue because that obviously isn't true. And I think more and more people are starting to push back against it. Like 10 years ago, I would never have thought that Paper Mario Sticker Star, one of the most reviled Nintendo games ever made, would have like cultivated a entire community of people who like who defend and enjoy the newer games, right? People like Arlo, people who like attack the first two paper who worship the first two Paper Mario games while hating the others. Those people are a dying breed. They really are. I've been thinking lately that like Origami King in a lot of ways that and Color Splash, it's really won over a lot of people to like the ideas of what the Paper Mario team is trying to do with these newer titles. People are starting to like appreciate these games for what they are, and like the hardcore fanboys who like refuse to even like tolerate the idea that these games can be something different. Like they're going to like they're either going to convert and buy the new games, or they're just going to like stay away and complain about something they don't even know anything about, really. I don't think it's sustainable, honestly. Like I think when it comes to like this industry of people who just hate Nintendo games on the internet, I don't think they're relevant in 2022. I really don't. I've noticed that I personally don't watch any YouTube channels or watch any gaming news at all because all of that is like streamlined through my Switch, right? Like I get we have you have like featured tabs, you have like news tabs, you have like all this really valid ways to keep up with all like the relevant major releases. Like if you play an indie game and like it, you can immediately go to their indie game store, to their page on the shop and realize like, oh, these guys, oh, you liked Yeast 8? Check out like Trails of Cold Steel, right? That's how I discovered Trails, right? Like I got Yeast, investigated what else the company has made, and decided to make the plunge into Trails. And going by what I've played of Trails so far, which admittedly isn't a lot, I really enjoy it. This this is becoming easier and easier to do. And as a result of that, I think more and more game journalists are going to become like increasingly obsolete, right? I personally go out of my way to avoid them because I don't trust anything they say. They're always pushing an agenda. They're always trying to trash talk games that I like, and I no longer want to hear anything from them whatsoever. Breath of the Wild is one of the best games ever made, and there is nothing that Nichegamer can do to say otherwise. Convince me otherwise.